Yeah, welcome back to the 2023 verdict. Yes, it's Mr. Harris of Goli that's here. You didn't recognize yourself almost, did you?
No, I didn't.
Well, that's how many people don't recognize what's going on in this country. They're asking, is this still the same country? I'm seeing bags of coins. I have to go to the gym with bags of coins these days.
When you go to the bank now, they give you 5 Naira notes in tons, and then...
And you wonder, wow, is it that valuable these days now? But we know how this whole thing is playing
We're
out.
told that this probably could reflect the value of the Naira at some point in time, so...
Is this, I mean, has that been your experience? Have you been given 5 Naira notes?
Oh, yes, I have been given 5 Naira notes. They come brand new, all right, yeah, but in bundles, and to take like 100,000 Naira was quite a whole lot, you know, and it was really crazy. Yeah?
But as a senior lawyer, when you face that, and you know what the law says and what the authorities are saying, what goes through your mind?
Well, I see there's a disconnect. There's some form of confusion, because the process is not following, you know, duly to an end that you will say that service is properly delivered. I'll give you an instance. The law is very clear on the issue of, you know, currency redesign, you know, management of currency and the powers of the Central Bank of Nigeria under the directive of the President. But the implementation of it now, particularly the time frame and the season in which we are, is such that it's causing a lot of confusion. And then one other side of it is that one moment you hear, you know, from one arm of government telling you they will obey the order of court, at least the Attorney General tells you that they will obey order of court, and we're happy about that. Then the CBN says, all right, 1 minute they're also saying they will obey, and then, which invariably means they'll extend the time as by virtue of the order of the Supreme Court. And then only yesterday or so, we're reading again and listening that they're saying that, look, the date stands. So which would be clearly an affront on the order of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, which is unfortunate. So it leaves everybody in confusion.
You know, for instance, I mean, when you say clearly an affront, because I think part of the narrative is Mark Bayer was trying to make it also this morning, because could it be that there are actually people in the CBN or lawyers in the CBN who are telling the CBN governor, you're in declare. If you're not a party to the suit, you can't say you're in breach of any law. Can that be possible?
I'd rather say no, with due respect, because the duty of obedience of court order is on all and sundry. That's one. And then secondly, when there's an order of court and you are dissatisfied with the order of court, under the concept of rule of law, the option open to you is to approach that court or appeal against the judgment of court. In this case, what we have at hand is a case where there is an ex parte order of court, which, you know, in no time would efflux. However, if you are dissatisfied with the order of the Supreme Court, in this case, the Supreme Court of Nigeria, the appropriate thing to do is to approach the court, either seek to join as a party, and then make your case, rather than stay back and say, look, you would not obey the order of court. That is contempt ex facie curia, and it's unfortunate. But that's clearly against the grain of rule of law.
I have further questions, but we have another guest online, and he's joining us via Zoom from Ilorin, Mr. Kehinde Eleja, who's also a legal practitioner and founder, head of practice, Kiki Eleja and Company. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be part of the program this morning.
Well, I'm sure that you've had quite a fair share of your own experience in Ilorin, the state capital of Kwara State. And I'm wondering, from what it is that you have experienced and what it is that you have seen going on, and the pronouncement of the CBN governor yesterday while meeting with the diplomatic corps here in Nigeria, I'm wondering, do you think that the CBN is in contravention of the order of the Supreme Court asking all parties to stay action pending its ruling or its convenience today?
Thank you very much. Well, I think a convenient starting point would be for me to say that the experience here in Ilorin has been quite very challenging. You know, Nigerians, the way we operate, POS operators have been capitalizing on the situation, and some of them charge as much as 20% to dispense money to customers. It's been very, very hectic, and the fear I have is that unless it's done urgently, we may get to a situation whereby many small businesses will be paralyzed, because you have a situation whereby you have sellers of perishables, especially, who are willing to sell their wares. You have willing buyers, but the problem now is because people have presumably acting on the directive of the CBN, been rejecting these so-called old notes, contrary to the order of the Supreme Court. And so I think we may be heading for anarchy unless something is done urgently. Because bear in mind that most Nigerians do not operate electronic platform, especially in the rural areas. So after that, I want to say that the situation we have on hand now concerning the Supreme of the Central Bank of Nigeria, but the valid order made by the Supreme Court is most unfortunate. It is unfortunate because the Central Bank of Nigeria itself is a creation of Constitution. The appointment of the governor of the Central Bank is something that is regulated by law. Now we have a situation where an order has been made, like my learned brother has said. The duty which is incumbent upon everyone, no matter how high, who is aware of an order that affects his interest, is to take legal steps to challenge such an order. It is beyond any individual, no matter how highly placed, to take the laws into his own hands and take it as if it does not exist. That does not demonstrate civility. It smacks of arrogance. It smacks of irresponsibility. Because it is very clear, it is a well-known fact that the order was necessitated by the conduct of the CBN, which in the first place failed to do the needful. Otherwise, if the CBN had done the needful, we would not be where we are today. So it is really very unfortunate, and I do not see any justification for the conduct of the CBN governor. Don't forget that under the Constitution, the Attorney General of the Federation is somebody who is clothed with the power and authority to represent the federal government. And I dare say it's agencies in courts, especially in the Supreme Court. And what we have here is not different. The Attorney General of the Federation has been sued. An interim order has been made. Of course, it is incumbent upon the CBN to respect such an order. Oh. The only condition why it's not going to be, the only option open is for the CBN through the Attorney General to go to the Supreme Court to challenge the order. Otherwise, the whole essence of the rule of law will be debased, and they will be heading for a serious crisis. And it is unfortunate that this is playing out. Hello?
Yeah, Mr. Ledger, just pardon me. Let me bring it back to me, the SAN here. You know, this has several implications. I mean, we're initially talking about the diplomatic community, how they will be, what they'll be thinking, listening to the CBN governor telling them that, well, they are insisting on the February 10 deadline, where the point of the law, as you say, and Mr. Ledger also underscores, is that this is in breach of the law. So they will be thinking, are they violating, is he telling us he's blatantly violating their own Supreme Court's laws? And then you have, excuse me, law students. Everybody's watching and saying, wait a minute, what's going on? Is this the way the country is going to run? And then the legal community also looking at, because who knows? The next government could look at this scenario and feel, all right, so if they violate the rule, the law of the Supreme Court, nothing happened, okay, means I could do it again, and who knows? So it has huge implications that we may not even know how this will pan out eventually. And what do you think? How should the legal community approach all of this? Because it's got huge implications for them and the entire country.
Well, first I'd like to say that we all have a duty to be law-abiding. We all have a duty to be to comply with orders of court. And where orders of courts are met, it behoves upon all of us to ensure that adherence to it is maintained entirely. Now, under a situation where you find orders being flouted, particularly the orders of the Supreme Court, however made, are being flouted, it negates the principle of rule of law, and it creates anarchy, which will loom large. Clearly, it is a bad signpost, it's a bad signal for law students, for any concerned citizen, to see that the laws of this land, which the Supreme Court is the chief interpreter of the law, because the judiciary interprets the law and the Supreme Court sits apex in terms of interpretation of the law. The laws can be flouted flagrantly without anything happening, no consequence whatsoever. It's unfortunate. And it gives a very wrong impression of the kind of country we are to the international community. Because we're talking about sovereignty, rule of law, and respect in the Committee of States. When you're dealing with a country that the CBN, no less a person than the CBN, tells you in the face of an order of the Supreme Court that we will stick to our gun, and it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court of the land has said, I'm sure the diplomats themselves will be wondering what's going on in this country. How can this happen? I mean, how are we sure that if we enter into any agreement with you, if we enter any treaty with you, and there's an order of court, be it in Nigeria or outside, that you will abide by it? It's a very wrong signal for the image of the country, more so at this point in time.
I'd like to, I am a little perturbed by the seeming, because some people will say perhaps we should still give the CBN the benefit of the doubt, that it is not possible that the CBN will look the Supreme Court in the face and decide that it's still going to stick by its guns. There needs to be questions asked of the body as to precisely why it has taken a stance. I want to look at perhaps the words that the CBN governor used. He said, no need for extension. Do you think that could imply that as a result of that ruling and the fact that the Supreme Court is going to be sitting today, perhaps there was really no need for them to take another decision to extend the deadline? And there's those who also argue that there's usually like a 7-day window in which banks can still collect the old notes, and perhaps that might inform why the CBN governor would say no need for an extension. Do you think that we're misreading it here? Well,
even though I want to give the benefit of doubt to the CBN governor, because it's unimaginable that he would have said the things that are attributable to him under the circumstance, it still remains to say that even if the CBN is of the view that there is no need, the implication, the connotation, and the effect of that statement that has been made by the CBN governor or attributable to the CBN governor has a negative effect, not only on law, but on the economy. Now, Naira is a currency of trade. A situation whereby you're not even sure from point A to B which Naira to use. Because you have the old Naira notes, 1 minute you're told it is legal tender, another minute you're told it's not legal tender. You don't even know which to trade with. It creates confusion in the polity. It creates confusion in the economy. So that alone is the economic, the socio-economic part of it. Now, on the legal part of it, whatever you do that tends to create anarchy or demean or belittle or ridicule the position of law as stated by the Supreme Court is contemptuous. So the effect of what he's saying, either by words or by conduct, affect negatively the pronouncement of the Supreme Court. And the ripple effect is that it threatens and challenges the rule of law in a society that is governed by the Constitution, like Nigeria.
All right, let's bring in our colleagues in Lagos.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Let me begin with Mr. Eleja, and I hope you can hear me, Mr. Eleja. You heard your colleague the other time, Mr. Ogbole, say that the implication, when Chamberlain asked him a question along that line, that the implication of what the governor of the CBN has done is contempt of court, because I think it's section 287 of the Constitution says whenever the Supreme Court gives a ruling, it is binding on everyone, every agency of government that is concerned in that case. Now, we have all said that it is wrong. The implication, what are the implications and what are the consequences for anyone or agency of government that disobeys the ruling of the Supreme Court?
Well, the law has always been clear. If it is proven that an individual or an agency has deliberately flouted an order of the court, the consequences are clear. And the consequences is that individuals who are operators of the agency flouting the order and whose the disobedience could be traced to may be sanctioned by the law court, even though it's a criminal matter and it will entail further things being done before such individuals could be punished. And I guess that is why the CBN governor is maintaining this kind of attitude, because it is going to be a criminal proceedings. Certain things will have to be done. You have to serve certain forms. You have to, then all sorts of arguments may come in. You know, you talk of proof beyond reasonable doubt. When you want to talk of the content, you have to demonstrate that somebody has deliberately done it. But the consequences are clear. But even beyond this now, I think we should not just confine ourselves to the criminal aspect of this matter. We have to look at it broadly. What does it portend for us as a nation, especially in the international before the international community?
Well, Mr. Legda, you're spot on that, but just a quick follow-up on that question. Now, one of the questions we put to the SAN we had yesterday, Mr. Falana, was, what is the timeline of obedience or compliance with any ruling of the Supreme Court? And since you've said, of course, that it's a matter that is still ongoing and all of that, does that mean that the ruling that was given, you know, concerning, you know, the extension or not of it, of the February 10 deadline, does that mean that there is a timeline to it, that, you know, the CBN could still stretch it a little, as opposed to being an order that should be effected immediately?
Well, it is an interim order. It was granted to last till today. So up till this morning,
when should that order have taken effect? Is it until today or immediately?
The order takes immediate effect once it is pronounced by the Supreme Court.
Which begs the question, just a second, which begs the question of the question that we're asking around the consequences of not effecting that order immediately by the agencies of government concerned.
Well, that's the point I'm making. The consequences are clear. Whoever has run foul of an express order of the court will be subjected to contempt proceedings. Like I said, it's another ball game altogether, and all sorts of technical issues could be raised. Oh, the order was not made against me directly. The order was not made directly against the CBN, and so on and so forth. I think that's the kind of argument those who may be advising the CBN governor to toe this line might have advanced to him. But the point I am making is that in a situation like this, there is an incumbent duty. Don't forget that this order emanated and in fact is directed at the CBN. The Attorney General of the Federation, through the CBN, is asked to ensure that the pronouncement is suspended until today. So there is that duty, obligation of the CBN to comply with that order until today, when the Supreme Court may decide to extend the tenure of the order or to vacate it. But until it's vacated, it subsists, and the CBN governor is in contempt of the court. But like I said, the procedure is quite elaborate before you now.
Before we get to that one, Mr. Ledger, just one quick one before Bukola comes in. Just one quick one. Now, the president was the one that was literally directly addressed by that ruling of the Supreme Court. Is that to say then that the president is the one that should have ordered the CBN, and if the CBN governor didn't get that order from the president, then he's not under obligation to obey the ruling of the Supreme Court?
Well, the way it is that once the Attorney General of the Federation is sued as a party in the matter, it is taken that it's representing the president and all the agencies that will be involved. So one would have expected in an ideal situation where there is synergy and well coordination between the agencies of government, that the Federal Attorney General will have advised the CBN governor on the duty on him to comply with that order. Don't forget that both the CBN governor and the Attorney General of the Federation are all appointees of the president. So it's unfortunate that it has played out this way, but I think it would not have been out of the place, whatever it is worth, for the president to also have advised the CBN governor. I don't want to use the word direct, but I think that may be the appropriate word, to have directed the CBN governor to comply with that order, which was given against the Attorney General, including the president and the agencies that are subject matter of that litigation. In this case, the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Ledger. Let me now take you to the senior advocate in our Abuja studio. Mr. Ogbole, from timeline of implementation to the execution of the Supreme Court's order itself, and I refer to our conversation with your colleague, Senior Advocate Falano, yesterday. He said in implementing the order, you don't break the law, frowning on the governors, but particularly Governor of Kano State, sanctioning a supermarket for rejecting the old note. So who holds the burden of implementing the Supreme Court order, especially where it's been, flouted as we, scrutinize the action of the CBN governor now? As we speak, the order is still subsisting. So who's supposed to implement the order that isn't implementing the order?
Thank you very much. First of all, we all have a duty to abide by that order. And by abiding by that order, invariably it means also implementing that order. But the forceful implementation, the assertive implementation of that order is with law enforcement agencies, particularly the police. And to trigger, apart from the natural course of events, of obedience, of enforcement of law orders by the security agencies, particularly the police, to trigger another chain aspect of the enforcement is a committal proceeding, where there is a disobedience to the order of court, which is a criminal process. Like my brother Silk had just said, that is a process which commences with, forms and, service and like a trial. But the actual enforcement of orders of court is basically the law enforcement agents. And in Nigeria, the Attorney General plays a major role because he represents government and also, the federal tier of government, and all the security agencies are under the executive arm of government, the federal arm of government, and the Attorney General, as the chief law officer, will advise for enforcement. So gladly, he has already said that they would obey order of court, but it's unfortunate that the reports, if correct, that we're hearing from the CBN governor and other sectors are to the contrary. So I do hope that there will be some.
Mr. Ogbole, where we do not see that, is it safe to conclude that the administration lacks the political will to obey the Supreme Court's ex parte order?
First of all, it is unfortunate. I mean, we have a convoluted state of affairs where it's not clear, who is, whether the dog is wagging the tail or the tail is wagging the dog. It's unfortunate. But that said, it is something which all hands must be on deck to ensure that there's compliance. There's just no two-way about it. It must happen. I mean, the Attorney General will take appropriate steps to ensure that, you know, the enforcement, because we all have a duty to preserve the sanctity of the courts and to maintain rule of law.
You're spot on there.
As we wind down now.
You're spot on there, Mr. Ogbole. Sorry, Maukwe. You're spot on there, Mr. Ogbole, when you say we all have a duty. But reports also suggest that courts are rejecting the old Naira note. And, you know, my colleague Chamberlain was asking, what should the legal community do, you know, in the face of the flagrant disregard of this court order? But when we have the courts rejecting the old Naira notes from lawyers, where does that leave us?
Well, yeah, I've also read that report myself. But you see, we live in a society where we're all intertwined. The payments made to the court would not remain at the courts. They'll go to the banks. And the banks themselves are also rejecting old currency notes. And again, there's a confusion as to whether which of the currencies, you know, and, you know, what exchange rate of Naira to Naira, you know, between financial institutions, POS, agents, and what have you. So, yes, we hear that report, but I think that I would want to take that with a pinch of salt. I do know that the court environment, first of all, their payments are usually largely electronic these days, you know, they use remitter, you know, bank transfers and what have you. So, I do want to believe that they would comply with the order of court by accepting the notes as they are, the old notes as they are, because that still is the order. So I have a doubt as to the reality of that situation, honestly.
Well, as we wind down now, let me quickly bring this up front. The CBN governor did meet with members of the House of Representatives, and part of what we heard, as you know, as part of what they came up with, was the fact that the old note would not lose its value if it is presented to the CBN at any time. That the CBN has, you know, instrument under its laws which mandates it to collect those old notes. So do you think that, I mean, even though the February 10 date, I mean, from what the CBN governor has said stands, do you think he's perhaps relying on the fact that people wouldn't lose their money? Because that was the reassurance he gave members of the House of Reps, to be able to say that that extension still, that there will be no need for an extension.
Hello?
Mr. Ledger, that's for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I believe that statement, it will still not address the situation in which we are in. Because how many customers will take money to the CBN? How many customers will be able to buy with the so-called old note now, things that they desire to buy? So I think he's just trying to be clever by half. The arrangements about taking these things to the CBN is between commercial banks and the CBN. We are talking about relationship between customers, users of money, and those that they wish to do transaction with. So I think that window has really not addressed the situation, and it has also not exhibited compliance with the order of the Supreme Court. That's my take on that.
Oh, no, I already said that before, but I want to know what your expectations are when the Supreme Court convenes much later today. We know that a number of state governors have indicated interest to join the suit. They've asked the attorneys general to be a part of it. What are your expectations as a lawyer and also a Nigerian who has, you know, felt the pains of the people and perhaps experienced it himself?
Well, I don't want to preempt what will happen in the court, but I believe that the attitude of the Supreme Court so far has been one that is nationalistic, and I do not expect that they will depart from that course, because as the last court of the land, they have a duty to ensure that the economy is salvaged. And in this instance, from the CBN to do otherwise may lead to chaos and anarchy in the nation. That's my take.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. Mr. Kehinde Eleja is a legal practitioner and also founder, head of practice at KK Eleja and Company. Thank you so much for coming on this morning, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, yes, indeed. Well, we still have Mr. Ogbole here with us. But, you know, that particular part where the CBN appeared before the House of Reps and made that statement, and then also remembering that there was that CBN circular where they had extended the timeline, the deadline with which you could deposit your money with the banks from February 10 to 17. Now, at this point, many are confused and wondering, are they still going to accept this money? Does that deadline subsist when he's still talking about February 10? So it's all just part of the confusion. So since they made that announcement, and now he spoke about February 10, which one do you think subsists? The one that is still being circulated by their own circular, can that still be right? Will they still be within their rights, within the law, to go forward to the banks and deposit that money in spite of this February 10 date that's all over the place?
Well, that's the confusion we talk about. And the confusion now negates the confidence we would have in our currency. As a legal tender, we should be able to have confidence that anytime you present your currency, it is honored. Now, even amongst your own citizens, if your currency is not honored, not because they don't love your currency, but because of the discordant tunes from government agencies, particularly the chief custodian of the currency, which is the CBN. 1 minute they come up with a directive, with a circular, another minute there's a pronouncement to another effect, another minute, so all of this convolution puts us in a quandary. So that really, it doesn't help the value of the Naira. It doesn't help, and besides, it puts the citizenry into greater penury. So that's the situation we have, and it's unfortunate. And that's what the Supreme Court sought to cure by saying, hey, you know what, put a hold on this thing, pending say today or a later date, and then issues will be canvassed, addressed, and then they'll take a decision one way or the other. But now here we are in a situation whereby we're further exacerbating the situation and saying, okay, no, we would hold on to the position that we took before now. So perhaps at the end of the day we'll have a clearer picture. But where we are now, it's no one really knows the situation. Well,
really, I think that people, I feel like, it's like we've been played like a yo-yo. 1 minute we're high up, the next minute, we're down. We saw that the frantic move by the House of Representatives to hold that conversation with the CBN. And it would seem that after they had that conversation, tempers were calm, there was a little less tension. And then when the January 31 date approached, and we saw almost the chaos at the ATM branches, at the ATMs, etc., and bank branches, the CBN gave an extension, an extra 10 days, and we thought everything was calming down until we saw that, oh, it doesn't look like this currency is available. I'm just wondering, this is not in the area of law now. This is nothing it has to do. When you look at your own level of transactions, do you really think that this is a policy that could have worked? I mean, the fact that the CBN intended to mop up so much and only wanted to give out so little because they wanted a lot of people to migrate to, the cashless platforms.
Well, across the world, it's standard practice that, after a number of years, your currencies are redesigned and remanaged, and the law provides for it, the CBN Act provides for it. However, the implementation in this current scenario is where we have a problem. Now, talking about the meeting with the House of Reps, it was a noble thing the House of Reps did by saying, look, we feel we represent the people and we feel the pulse of the people. So look, CBN governor, CBN, please come and tell us what's going on and how do we solve this problem to assuage the feelings and what have you. But it appeared to me that what happened there was a placebo effect, because it appeared that we got assurances from CBN that, it's all okay, like that. And then from there, boom, things apparently got worse. Because sometimes you move around town, maybe around 8 p.m., and then you see hundreds and hundreds of people, women and children, queuing at ATM stations and, at banks and all of that, at that late hour. you can imagine what will happen.
And that's why many who were spoken to, outside
and you know
studios,
that some banks have been attacked.
Yeah, and several of them
and even bank
didn't go to work. So in fact, some think that in the rural areas, that all of these things is just sophistry, that they don't know what's going on, and people are actually dying. We've seen videos of elderly, senior citizens weeping, say they wanted to just buy some medication and they couldn't get it because they can't access funds. So for them, this whole thing is just sophistry, and it has huge implications. But we still have a president in this country, and many wonder, could the CBN be doing all of these things without the whether tacit or express permission or support or approval of the president?
Well, one thing for sure is that a community reading of the CBN Act, particularly from Section 18 to 20 to Section 20, would tell you that, acts of CBN relating to currency redesign, swap, or whatever, needs the approval of the president. So it must come with, not even Minister of Finance, with the president. So one way or the other, the box stops on the table of the president.
Let me just bring you, because that date that we spoke about, it was the CBN circular, which was released, and then they announced that deadline. So if you could just bring it up on the screen. And so some parts of it, there was a paragraph, the very last paragraph of that release by the CBN, which was signed by him. That's why people are asking questions as to what does this then do? Or what does this stand in light of the CBN statements yesterday? So this is the last paragraph, last page of that CBN circular, which was signed by the CBN governor himself, which says, a 7-day grace period beginning on February 10 to February 17, 2023, in compliance with Section 20, Sub 3 and 22 of the CBN Act, allowing Nigerians to deposit their old notes at the CBN after the February deadline, when the old currency would have lost its legal tender. So it means that now with this, people
Sorry, can you go to Section 20, subsection 3? Let's have a better presentation of it.
Of this...
it's a CBN Act, not of the Constitution.
That's the CBN Act. Yeah, I was talking about the CBN Act.
I'm talking about CBN Act.
Yes, it's making reference to the both.
Yeah, the CBN was making reference to their own
Act. Yes, please.
Now,
can you place that Section 20 of the subsection 3 particularly?
We'll bring it out right now. But
right,
this question now, this is the press statement by, just reading the headline here, the press statement by Godwin Emefiele, Governor, Central Bank of Nigeria, January 29, 2023, on progress of implementation of new redesigned currency by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So this is what was said that day. So one wonders now, people are saying that the banks are not even accepting the old notes. So you then wonder, but this is a directive from the CBN themselves. What do people do?
Yeah, you see, indeed, after the closure, the eventual closure of the date for currency swap, if you may, banks will transact with the CBN concerning, exchange of notes. And it's, at that point in time, it's not an individual thing between bank customers or regular users. So it is between the banks, the commercial banks.
But with this, before that 17th deadline, citizens can take their old notes to the bank. That's what they understand from this.
Yeah, but the question is it really happening? The banks are not even accepting the old notes now. I have that experience. I don't know if it's other banks, but I have been to a particular bank with old notes, and they're like, you know what, if you have, find a way of paying it into your, how else can I pay it into my account?
But when the CBN said bring it to the bank or to the CBN, is it to the banks or to the CBN, or is it the same thing?
Maybe they mean have an arrangement with the bank where it is put in a vault, and then...
Vault?
I don't know.
Vault is not your account.
No. Where at that point in time, they would eventually, at the close of the date, the terminal date, they will relate with CBN. Some kind of policy that they have. I mean, it's internal to them. I wouldn't know that part of it.
And that's why I said perhaps we need to, reread the CBN governor's words when he says no need for an extension. He doesn't quite say we stand by our February 10 deadline. But I've been trying to look for the BOFIA now. Yes.
No, CBN Act.
It's different from the buffet, is
Yeah,
it?
is it?
Oh, okay. So I think we might need to find the CBN Act. We'll look for the CBN Act. Look for the CBN Act and
particularly
see
Section 20,
subsection 3.
That
but
has been made
given what he has told the banks, because that's supposed to be a circular to the banks,
yes,
shouldn't that have served as some reassurance to citizens that perhaps there was an implicit compliance with the order of the Supreme Court, perhaps?
Well, I wouldn't think so, because the effect of it, which is palpable for all to see, is that there's that of non-compliance. That's the effect that we see, because the confidence you will have in your currency to say that it is still legal tender by virtue of the order of the Supreme Court. The question is, do we have that confidence? The banks themselves, from what they exhibit, don't have that confidence. The citizens, if you can't use that as a medium of exchange for trade, then what are we talking about?
Okay.
Because the people would prefer to use the new currency rather than the old currency.
All right.
Yeah.
So that CBN Act which you speak about,
yes,
which talks about banks' currency notes and coins to be legal tender.
Yeah.
It says 21, the currency notes issued by the bank shall be legal tender in Nigeria at their face value for the payment of any amount. 2, the coins issued by the bank shall, if such coins have not been tampered with, be legal tender in Nigeria at their face value up to such amount or amounts as may be determined from time to time by the bank. 3, notwithstanding subsection 1 and 2 of this section, the bank shall have power, if directed to do so by the President, and after giving reasonable notice in that behalf, to call in any of its notes or coins on payment of the face value thereof, and any note or coin, with respect to which a notice has been given under this subsection shall, on the expiration of the notice, cease to be legal tender, but subject to Section 22 of this Act, shall be redeemed by the bank upon demand.
Now, the Section 22 that talks about there relates to defaced currencies, which will not apply. They will not take defaced. Those ones are for destruction.
Okay, I'm trying to look at it now, but perhaps we should read it, because legal language can sometimes be so convoluted.
Sub 3 there,
yes,
is what the CBN guideline says it's okay. It's already on the screen.
Yes,
that's what the CBN guideline seems to be deriving its authority from.
Yes. Do you want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Which one? 20 or 23?
23. It says the bank shall have power, if directed to do so by the President, and after given reasonable notice in that behalf, to call in any of its notes or coins on payment of the face value thereof, and any note or coin with respect to which a notice has been given under this subsection shall, on the expiration of the notice, cease to be a legal tender, but subject to Section 22 of this Act, shall be redeemed by the bank upon demand.
Let me add 22 in case you want me to read that.
All right.
22:1 says, a person shall not be entitled to recover from the bank the value of any lost, stolen, mutilated, or imperfect note or coin. 2, the circumstances in which and the conditions and limitations subject to which the value of the lost, stolen, mutilated, or imperfect notes or coins may be refunded ex gratia shall be within the absolute discretion of the bank.
All right. Well, first I'm saying that the subsection referred to there as an exception relates to mutilated currencies and the likes.
Yeah.
Now, under Section 23 there, the provision is clear. After the expiration of the date, they can redeem. That is CBN redeeming. At that point in time, it is not an all-commerce transaction. It is CBN redeeming upon demand. And the demand here is between the banks, that's what we've always said, between the banks and the CBN. Because as regular citizens, you don't have access to CBN. You don't have any direct relationship with CBN. It is only the banks that can relate with CBN. So that demand can only come from the banks. So when the demand, when the banks, from whatever currencies they have, if they are not able to send those currencies to CBN before that expiration date, whatever currencies they have can be taken to the bank to be honored after that date. Now, before that particular date, you can take your old currencies to the bank. The CBN has already said that after the date, the terminal date that they have prescribed,
which is now February 17th.
Which for now would say, you know, I don't want to say it's February.
But that's what this
I don't want to say so, you know, in the light of the order of court and the light of the fact that the matter is still ongoing. I'd like to leave that open-ended.
All right.
You know, that's my choice, pardon me, at this moment.
Yeah,
so, but the point I'm making is, at that point in time, the currency you can no longer take to the bank. So if you can no longer take to the bank, from where would the bank now take that currency to the CBN?
Yeah, so maybe the banks are in contravention of even the circular of the CBN. Should we blame the banks here? Maybe they are misunderstanding, or maybe perhaps the CBN, the circular is yet to circulate to all branches of the banks, because it might surprise you that some banks might collect it and some banks might reject it. Wouldn't that just be a result of perhaps information hasn't percolated as it ought to have?
Well, I wouldn't know that aspect of it, but I'd like to look at the effect. And the effect, like we all know, and I'm sure you're also affected by these decisions, you one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Or somebody you know
affected.
is also affected. You know, we have aged parents in, you know,
I don't have areas, for instance. I don't know if my boy does. I don't. So I'm affected. Yes.
No, I think
you're right on that. You're right on the money. The money I don't have.
You probably have better access to the new notes than some of us.
she right? I told you, she does. She makes.
Yeah.
But you know,
I wish that we were a fair representation of Nigerians. You know, I wish that if almost everyone in this studio were a fair representation of Nigeria, because when you go out there is when you begin to understand the impact of this policy. And for some people, they think that perhaps that's where this policy was derived from. Maybe there is an expectation that many Nigerians are like us. Or like, because if you ask us, I mean, if you ask someone like me, how much transaction have I done, you know, with cash or versus online, the chances are very high that perhaps 80% of the transactions have been online. So, but when you go out there and you see that there are people who depend on a day-to-day basis, their existence depends on having cash at hand. In the marketplace, hawkers, even beggars. There are grievous questions to ask about.
Even beggars.
Yes, about the implication of not having cash in circulation in the country. You know, so that question you ask, I mean, even though presenters rarely take on, we rarely answer questions, it does raise further questions as to how in touch are the people who make policies with the average or the everyday Nigerian. I think that's a question to ask here.
Well, that's appropriate. It's an appropriate question to ask. And we also need leaders with empathy. Leaders should feel the pulse, feel the pain that the citizenry feel, and react responsively to that. However well-intended a policy is, if it inflicts immediate and future pains on your citizens, I mean, the end of it is that, would you really say that's a good policy in terms of its implementation? You know, we'll talk about reasonable time. The question again you want to ask is that the time that the time prescribed by CBN for this currency swap, is it reasonable in the circumstance? The population of the country today, the amount of money available in circulation, not captured by the banking system, the effect of technology or lack of it on the citizenry. Only yesterday, I think, MTN was down for about for a number of hours.
Yeah.
If you were stuck in a place where you needed to do cash transfer, you know, probably at the airport or, you know, in some place where you needed to do cash transfer, you didn't have cash. You fall back on technology. you were in the hospital, if you were in the hospital to make payments, and they are waiting for you to make payments or buy drugs. For 4 hours, you can't transfer. You don't have cash. So
there are people who have experienced that.
Yeah. So these are the effects that we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, so government should do something, you know, that will ameliorate the pains that we all are facing.
Well, they can't claim not to have this data. They were the ones who are telling the whole country that these are the amount of people who are unbanked. These are the amount of people in the rural areas who we want to bring in. So they have all that data. So they cannot feign ignorance on this one. But I want to thank you for coming on. Harris Ogbole, a senior advocate of Nigeria.